Welcome everyone online that's joining us. Welcome everyone here. We're going to begin our next session, which is unacceptable behavior. And it's going to be presented by one of YOSEF North America's elders, Ed Boring. It's interesting because when YOSEF first started off, I was the chairman of the elders for the first 2 years. During those 2 years, John was the vice chairman. When my 2 years expired 2 years ago, John moved into the chairman position and Ed moved into the vice chairman. In another month, John's going to be vacating the chair, and that's going to be our new chairman. And we'll have to elect a new vice chairman from among the elders. So we're thrilled to have Ed and Wendy, and of course John and Joey with us. And I'd like to introduce you to Ed, all the way from Fresno, California. Now I know Fresno because my wife and I took my kids to California, and I like to see sights. I like to see things, and the company I worked for blessed us with a motorhome, 35-foot motorhome to travel. We rented it from Cruise America. And so I said, hey, I want to go see the giant sequoias, which you've got to go through. For us, we had to go through Fresno to get there. Yeah. And yeah, didn't know that the roads were going to be like this, you know. And in that motorhome, my wife and the kids were, when they had to make transitions from the front to back, were getting bruises on their legs and everything because I was driving maybe a little reckless, a little fast, whatever. I was trying to make up time because we had to get somewhere, we had to be, and I was making a detour to see the giant sequoias. But anyway, would you please welcome Ed Boring from Fresno?
Thank you, Mark. It is a great honor to be standing here today to bring a message to you on behalf of YOSEF North America. First of all, just let me say your program says unacceptable behavior. The Mishpachah document itself says inappropriate behavior. Just in general, any kind of behavior that people wouldn't like. That's what we mean, whether it's unacceptable or inappropriate. So I was typecast to bring this message because if you look up inappropriate behavior in the thesaurus, the synonyms for it, there's a picture of me. I'm the king of inappropriate behavior. Anyway, and regardless of what Wally says. Because he thinks he is the king. He's not. I would like to very quickly acknowledge something here. First of all, thank you, Mark and Polly, and all of your staff, the sound folks and the kitchen folks and the logistics. I mean, I can't even hardly imagine what it took for you and your peoples to prepare for this event. And I'm just very grateful that you've gone to the trouble that you've gone to, and we thank you and bless you. And the tzedakah box is right here, everybody. Also, my wife and I drove over from Fresno, California. I know that some people flew in from as far away as Tennessee. And which is not in our region, but we still love them and accept them. John and Joy Conrad drove in from Utah. Other people drove in from Southern California, Oregon. Oh, you flew from Oregon, and in particular, Monterey, California. You flew in. The Netherlands, as you've already been told. I want to recognize one group of people here, and I hope that nobody else gets their nose bent out of shape over this. But the House of Aaron in Eskdale, Utah, has like a dozen people here. So I would like to ask, House of Aaron, would you rise and let us recognize you, please. Thank you. I really appreciate you going to that extent. I know, John has you all hoodwinked and brainwashed and whatnot, but it's exactly what I'm about to talk about. So I only have an hour, and I've already used up like 30 minutes, so I better get started. Part of what I'm going to ask you guys to do today is take a moment and realize that you're not just spectators sitting there looking this way. So I'm going to ask you to look around yourself for a minute or so, look into the eyes of the people around you, and say, I see you. I see you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Oh, yes, and that's my first cinematic reference. It's important that we see each other in the sense that we recognize, because what we're talking about here is mishpacha, and it's not that we should become mishpacha or that we should work on, creating mishpacha. We are mishpacha. You can't escape now. You're already there. Not something you can create. It's already present. So these are your family. Treat them right. Not like I'm about to tell you, inappropriately. Now, let's see if I can get the technology squared away here. No, somebody handed me some notes. I don't know if they have anything to do with my presentation, but I'm going to try. So, inappropriate behavior. I found that it was interesting that Mark talked a lot about shalom, about peace. That's probably the main thing that we need to recognize and be involved in. I toyed with the idea of reading the entire 12th chapter of Romans to you. Then I realized that I would have to read the entire letter. So the 12th chapter is particularly poignant because it talks about loving each other. It talks about surrendering yourself completely to his work, walking in the Spirit. It talks about we're one body with many members. And that sort of thing. It talks about if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he thirsts, give him drink. So doing, you heap coals of fire on his head. So the 12th chapter of Romans is pretty powerful in terms of how we're supposed to be treating each other. And the main word there is love each other. Just as Yeshua said, love Yehovah and love each other. So if possible, so far as it depends on you, live in shalom with all people. So what does that phrase mean? Depends on you. It means you have a choice to make. Am I going to live in peace with my brothers, or am I going to live in Hamas with them? Now, if you want Hamas in your life, there's plenty of it out there. Go have lots of Hamas. We're going to stay over here and be in shalom. Not hummus. Plenty of hummus, too. Get the kind with the pine nuts. That's the best kind. So, inappropriate behavior. I don't have as many like Greek and Hebrew and stuff there, but I do have one Latin word I'd like to share with you, and it's proprius. It's the word that, I'm going to have to just hold these. It's the word that appropriate and inappropriate are derived from. Proper, proprius, inappropriate. So proprius, the Latin word, means its own, or it's in particular. It belongs to something very particular. So inappropriate is something that belongs outside of what is proper or what belongs to us. So one of the things we have to do is recognize what belongs to us as a family and operate inside what belongs to us and eschew or get rid of the stuff that doesn't belong to us. So that's what the basis of appropriate and inappropriate behavior is. So lest you think that we're just pouring another bunch of commandments on your head and saying, okay, you got to do this, and you can't do that, and you got to do this, and you can't do that. You're right, that's what we're doing, but no, we're not. What we felt was important was that it's pretty easy to say we're family, let's act like family. But what does that mean? How should we act in each other's presence and when we're not together if we're to be family? So that led us to understand that our behavior matters. I'm almost going to steal some of John's thunder. I better be careful. I don't want to do that. This document, by the way, I just want to mention that the Mishpachah document was kind of a labor of love of our dear brother Frank Houts. He was the original drafter of the document, and there was a small committee of us that worked with him to, bash it around and figure out what happened. If you don't know Frank, if you never had the privilege of sitting under his teaching, he was one of the original elders of B'nai Yosef North America, and he passed away suddenly about a year ago, right? And on February 16th last year. It was unexpected, sudden, and heartbreaking. So anyway, he is kind of the author of the original document. So when we talk about appropriate and inappropriate, what context are we talking about? We're talking about the kingdom of Yehovah, right? That's who we're part of. When we say we're family, we're talking about being part of the kingdom of Yehovah. You have other contexts that you operate in, your home and your workplace, maybe this group here at Living Messiah, other associations and clubs, and public venues and private groups, and just all kinds of things, hobbies. In each one of those contexts of your life, there is this thing that's kind of unwritten about how you're going to act in that context. When you're with your bowling league, you're going to act a certain way. And don't tell me about it because I don't need to know. But there's appropriate behavior and there's inappropriate behavior. If you're a teacher at a high school, there's a certain way that you need to behave when you're at the school, and so on and so forth. You know how to act appropriately. And by the way, speaking of bowling, if you were a baseball player, do you think it would be appropriate to try to play that game with, let's substitute the baseball and let's use a shuttlecock or a hockey puck. Let's play baseball with a hockey puck. Is that appropriate? It wouldn't even work. Well, I mean, maybe it would sort of work, but not the right way. So you get the idea. Inappropriate behavior. Our instruction manual as the family, as the kingdom of Yehovah, is Torah. That's where we go to learn how we're supposed to behave. So now if you just take a few minutes, I'm going to open up at Genesis 1, verse 1, and I'm going to give you my audiobook version of the entire week. I only have an hour? Oh, never mind. The whole book is your instruction manual for how to behave. It's good to pull out certain verses and look at them and say, hey, this really speaks to me. I can memorize that. I can practice that maybe in my life, or I can try. But it's the whole thing. So if you're not looking at the whole book, I encourage you to start looking at the whole book. It's all about how you're supposed to act. Okay, somebody did something wrong with these notes. I don't know what's going on. So I have some questions I'm going to be asking you. And Mark, if anything happens here that's inappropriate, just tell Ward to turn the microphone off. Okay. How many of you are Star Wars fans? Or even have you seen, oh, Dave, good. All right, there's a couple of you that are like, no, sort of. You don't want to admit it because you're thinking that's not a very righteous thing to be doing. That's it? Yeah, you're like, Star Wars? What does that have to do with the kingdom of Yehovah? Well, I don't know. If you saw the most recent movie, there was a lot of interesting stuff in there about family and about inappropriate behavior and about destroying evil. So there's a character in there called Palpatine. He is like the representation of Hasatan. And there's two main characters, spoiler alert, in case you were planning on going to see the movie. There's two main characters, a man and a woman, who are, one represents the evil side, the other represents the good side. This young man on the evil side, he calls himself Kylo Ren, but he's really Ben Solo because he's the main bad guy, other than the Emperor himself, and he's the son of the two most important good guys in the whole Star Wars saga. Han Solo and Princess Leia had this little boy. They named him Ben. And then he went over to the dark side and became Kylo Ren. He's like the new Darth Vader, so to speak. Well, he spends the whole movie trying to get this other person, who's the main good person, to come over to the dark side with me. Just surrender to it. Well, she happens to be the granddaughter of Hasatan, of Palpatine, the emperor. So it's interesting that from a family perspective, you've got a child of the best people in the story and a grandchild of the worst possible person in the story, and they're representing opposite sides of the coin. And who's supposed to behave which way? Well, the good news is they finally got together and defeated the bad guy, and it was all good. Ben came home. He was the prodigal son, so to speak. But that's just just a secular, if you don't mind the term. I actually had someone tell me one time, there's no such thing as secular. Thank you, Brother Sakina. I try to remember that, but I spent like 65 years thinking otherwise. You listen to secular music? What is secular music? Okay, anyway. So the point is they had choices to make. The good guy and the bad guy, they had choices to make. Were they going to do whatever it took, whatever it cost? Were they going to stay on the light side, or were they going to give in to the dark side? So somebody really messed up these notes. I don't know what's happening here. So I do see something similar in our journey as the house of Ephraim in terms of family coming together. We'll look around and we're going to be surprised at who it is that claims to be our family. And we're going to say, but you're the bad guy. And hopefully the Ruach is going to whisper in your ear and say, no, that's your family. So this is why it's important, as Mark and as Hannah said earlier today, for us to get over whatever it is we have against the church. And believe me, I've been there. When you come to this understanding of Torah, you look back at what you were taught all your life, and you say, why were they teaching me that? This has nothing to do with the truth. So you tend to really stay at arm's length. And sometimes you say things you shouldn't say. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. Don't act inappropriately. And your family is more, or I should say, is other than you think it is. I mean, just look around. Really? Did you think these people were part of your family? Just saying. So that was now let's think about the word family for just a minute. I'm going to get to the inappropriate behavior. I know that's the only reason you're here to listen, because you want to like, ooh, inappropriate behavior. What's he going to say? Because we all like the inappropriate behavior. What comes to your mind when you consider the term family, or in Hebrew, mishpacha? Just take a minute. You don't have to answer this. It's a rhetorical question, primarily. I'm not going to ask you to give your answer. Now, if I was able to compile all of the responses that were in your heads when I said, think about the word family, and put them out here in front of us where we could see them, what have we got here? About 75, 100 people, something? I don't know. There would be that many responses because the images that came to your mind might have some similarities, but they would be different in every case. So family is something that's beyond us. We need to think beyond terms of blood relationship, which we're all thinking about, our mom and our dad, our grandparents, our aunts and uncles, our cousins, our brothers and sisters. our own kids, that's family. But we have to think in terms of our blood relationship with Yehovah, which is Yeshua HaMashiach. That's our blood relationship with each other. That's how we came to become family. And it's more real than what we have in the flesh. Our family relationship with each other is eternal. So there's going to be a point where you won't be with your family in the flesh anymore. You'll be with your family in the spirit. And that lasts forever. It's a long time. There's no way to capture the idea of family in that constrained, stereotypical way. But I think we'd all agree that the traditional concepts regarding family aren't what they used to be. I mean, if you just look around you in the world we live in today, family doesn't mean the same thing that it used to mean. That's why our eternal family is that much more important, because that's where we're going to spend the rest of our time with each other, or not time. Now, what would you have come to mind when you think of the term, forgot I had this one. Fun slide number 1. Oh, maybe it's number 2, since Star Wars was up there before. Besides having pictures of your aunts and uncles up there, what other things, what kind of traits might you have that would make you family with somebody else? These are a few ideas. If you live in the same house with somebody, you might think, hey, they're my family. If you share a bank account, you might think, that must be family. Things like that. Dietary consensus. That's a tricky one. What about the word unity? What comes to mind when you think of the word unity? I have a confession to make. I used to be a Southern Baptist pastor. Wow, that's the reaction I expected. Like, I don't know if that was horror or what that was. Waterboarding, is that what Hannah was talking about earlier? I actually like that joke. And so I spent a long time as outside the realm of Southern Baptist, actually began to get into the intercessory prayer movement and strategic prayer, territorial spirit, that kind of thing, mapping. And I was really into the unity of the church. So I went to great lengths to meet with other pastors in my community and say, let's come together and pray, let's talk, let's walk the community and pray for our people and things like that. And I got, like 3 other guys to do that with me out of like 75. So it was a difficult thing to try to do. I got a little discouraged about that idea of unity. It's the common picture I get in my mind of what unity should be. Everybody comes together in one place. There are different backgrounds, different denominations. We stand together, we hold hands, we sing Kumbaya, whatever it is, and that was unity. So I kept trying to make unity happen. Did I succeed? Not even a little bit. So what is unity? What's the kingdom of Yehovah's concept of unity? It's this, and you already know this. Echad. We say this in the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Means our Lord, our Elohim, is one. And Yeshua prayed in the 17th chapter of John. At the time, he didn't know it was the 17th chapter of John. He didn't say, please turn to the 17th chapter. He prayed for the unity, the oneness of his disciples, that they would be one like he and Father are one. So I told you all ago, you're already family. You don't have to make that happen. You're already one also. You might not act like it all the time, but we all have the same. We've been indwelt by the Ruach HaKodesh. It's the same Ruach HaKodesh that's in me, that's in you. That makes us one. We're already one. We just have to learn how to behave the way we should, as one. Echad. And now Zucchini is going to lead us in a rousing rendition of Hine Ma Tov. Does everybody know what Hine Ma Tov is? Oh, man. Psalm 133. Really? Hine ma tovu manaim shevet achim gam yachad. It's Psalm 133. How good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell together as one. The word in that scripture in Hebrew is yachad. It means when they dwell together as one, which is way beyond our idea of unity. Even though unity is should be it is. I mean, rewind. Unity should be what it should be. You know what I mean? We let words and labels get into our heads, and the connotations from all around us affect it. As our brother Hanukkah was saying, as you all know, and as I experience almost every day when I'm talking to people, and they want to know, what church do you go to? And I'm like, well, sit down, get a cup of coffee, because I need to. Because the freaky thing is, like the first sentence I tend to say is, I don't go to church. Which makes them go, what do you mean? Well, I believe we should be keeping the feast. You're Jewish? No. Yeah, so anyway, I'm not going to belabor this list. Oh, kingdom terms. I'm not keeping up with my own slides. That's inappropriate. I already told you why we're talking about inappropriate behaviors, because if we understand what's inappropriate when we're with each other, we can avoid that, theoretically. Okay, from the document, the Mishpacha Guidelines, this is the list. It's not an exhaustive list of how to behave inappropriately, just so you know. There's probably, a couple hundred other ways to act inappropriately. There's sort of general categories. And our brother John, genius that he is, pointed out to us that these 11 things we have listed here fall into one of three even more general categories, which is attitude, speech, and community behavior. So in other words, how are you acting when somebody comes up and says something you don't like? Well, I can't believe they said that. And more to the point, I'm going to go over here and tell my other brother, did you hear what he just said? Attitude and speech, not just what you say to somebody else, or that you heard fourth hand and said, we need to do something about. It's also what you say directly to somebody. And it's not just when you are upset with them and you're going to yell at them or call them names. It's also when you're trying to teach them something. Yeah, it's a big responsibility to pull on the mantle of a teacher. As I think Mark expressed too, you come up and stand behind this bema and you're going to say stuff and you're just beseeching the Father that what comes out of your mouth will not be offensive or will not be incorrect or will not misguide someone to something they shouldn't be hearing or undoing. So I and some others who were praying with me prayed for my mouth as I spoke, and more importantly, we prayed for your ears. So that buzzing that you're feeling and hearing, that's the Ruach. He's the babblefish in your ear going, no, that's not what he meant. He meant to say... Okay, who got the babblefish reference? Anybody? Thank you. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Thank you. Okay. I'll give the meaning of life in just a minute. It's on slide 42. Right. All right, so who are we? What are we doing? Why am I reading these notes? All right, we do not desire to create or try to enforce a binding list, of performance appraisal system. Most of the time, we don't intend that. Our hope and our intent is that by publishing these guidelines, we're putting something out there that's useful to you and that's less judgmental than a collection of measuring sticks. I'm Batman. I tried to find Batman, but I couldn't find him. I can't talk like Batman. I'm working on my impersonation since it's not getting any better. When I talked about doing the audiobook, I was going to do it as Moses, but the primary source tapes for Moses' voice are kind of degrading, so they're old. So I couldn't really get it. It kind of came up. Plus, I didn't speak the language that he spoke in those days. Anyway. Yeah. All right. Okay, so I'm going to show you something now that is a little bit different because I like to be different, not to say inappropriate. But I want you to just watch what I'm about to show you. It's from the YouTube. And it's a representation. It's actually from a movie from 1945, so it's black and white. Any of you understand what black and white is? And it's from the movie Rhapsody in Blue. It represents the debut of this particular piece of music. Well, what I want you to notice is how the instruments behave, how the conductor behaves, how the soloists behave, and then in this particular clip, there's an audience who's watching, and they're reacting in some different ways to what they're seeing and hearing on the stage. So just watch this for a few minutes, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. Hit it, Ward! We practiced that. Okay, by the way, if you were watching this on live stream, you didn't watch this on live stream because it's copyrighted material and we could not show it. So the folks here in the room were able to enjoy that. If you'd like to see it, go to YouTube and look under Rhapsody in Blue debut performance. Now, what was the point of that? I mean, it's great music. Don't you wish you could play the piano like that? There's a lot of different things to look at in here. One was the reaction of the various folks in the audience. You have seen that reaction, those reactions, multiple times. Many times it was the quizzical look. What are you talking about? Sometimes it was the, are you serious? Sometimes it was looking at the watch, is he about done? I don't know. And then the one guy in the balcony, he was kind of like, this is interesting. And he started, his hand was going like with the piano. I might need to look into this some more. He was interested. Some were just kind of bemused. Men and women look at each other. Isn't that sweet? Most of the time, that's the reaction we get when we try to share what we've learned with our family and friends. Am I right? They're either shocked or they're dismayed or they're disowning you or, whatever. They're bringing pork chops to your potluck, whatever. Anyway, the orchestra, if we look at the orchestra, first of all, you've got several different soloists. They're doing various things, playing altered shofars. And muted trumpets, whatnot. You'll notice, though, that when the larger group comes in, did you enjoy the sound that you were hearing? Okay, yeah, energy. Thank you. That's good. What is the sound that happens when a group of us comes together and we have an audience that sees what we're doing? Is it like that? Or is it a bunch of violins trying to be the solo clarinet? Or, the bass saxophone trying to be the piano? Every one of the members of that orchestra must follow the instructions that's on the music in front of them, to the note. They must keep their eye on the conductor. We know the conductor is. Even that solo piano player, when he was playing, did you notice he kept looking up? That's because he had to keep an eye on what the conductor was doing. If the conductor was going to give another instruction for him to move on to something else or change what he was doing, speed up, slow down, he had to respond to that. Are you looking up to make sure that the conductor's communicating with you so that you can behave appropriately by playing what's written on the instruction manual? Or are you a trombone trying to be the timpani? We have to be who we were called to be. Who are you? This involves a lot of different things here. I'm going to read a little list. It's not, again, an exhaustive list. But when you think about who you are, I know we've all, the idea of identity has really become very important to us because we have identified as Israel and we have identified as Ephraim. Now, who are we within the context of the house of Ephraim? You each have something in your life, a purpose, it's a destiny, it's an anointing, it's a calling, it's passion, it's giftings, it's personality, it's authenticity, it's ability, it's talent, it's that smile. All of that is who you are. And it's who Creator made you to be. If He made you to be a clarinet, don't try to be a saxophone. Come to grips with who you are and who you've been called to be. Because inappropriate behavior happens primarily when you're trying to be something that you're not. When you're not being your authentic self, you're going to behave inappropriately. All right, we also mean by inappropriate behavior concepts of responsible relationships, accountability, peaceful unity, these several terms. And now that I have 7.5 minutes left in my hour, I'd like to take a closer look at a couple of people. Oh, look, don't choose an instrument. Recognize what instrument you are and embrace that. Be who you are. Counterproductive. I just probably shouldn't have even had these slides. I'm going to take a look at 3 biblical examples because, Bible's full of bad behavior. Lots of examples of people behaving badly. Where Hamas was reigning supreme. Just a brief rundown, a few of those, a little roll call of Adam and Eve themselves, Cain, Ham, Korach, Nadav, Avihu, Balaam, Jezebel, King Saul, even King David, Jeroboam. He's the Ephraimites' favorite bad guy. Judas, Ananias and Sapphira. There's a lot of bad behavior going on there. How about Simon the sorcerer or the sons of Sceva? All those people trying to be something they weren't called to be. But I want to take a closer look at these 3 guys. I think you recognize the man in the middle. That's Moshe. This one over here, looking a little downcast, is Kepha, also known as Peter. And this one is Rav Shaul, Paul, the Apostle Paul. What? These heroes of the Bible engaged in inappropriate behavior? Well, yeah. Moshe, more than once, actually. Ultimately, he was not allowed to see the Promised Land or go into the Promised Land. He was allowed to see it. He was not allowed to go in because of his inappropriate behavior, hitting the rock. But I want to go to the pre-burning bush Moshe, where he recognized his identity as a Hebrew. He said, I'm a Hebrew. I should start acting like a Hebrew. I'm going to go kill myself an Egyptian. Well, of course it wasn't that simple. He was defending his brothers. His Hebrews were being beaten and mistreated by an Egyptian overlord. And Moshe said, not on my watch. And he went in there and took care of the Egyptian. I'm sure many, many sermons have been preached on the inappropriateness of Moshe's behavior in that particular instance. It's what drove him out into the wilderness for 40 years, familiar amount of time, to be a shepherd and then ultimately to be spoken to through the burning bush. But by the way, how did he act when Yahweh himself was speaking to him from the burning bush? Oh, no, I can't do that. I'm not a good speaker. Let me just encourage you. I know that's the normal human reaction, is how I would react probably, but if Yahweh is speaking to you and he's trying to tell you what he wants you to do, just accept that he's going to give you the ability to do that. So, pre-burning bush Moshe, example number 1, inappropriate behavior. By the way, I'm sharing with these examples just in case you thought you might be immune from committing inappropriate behavior. You can probably guess which one I'm going to here. No, it's not denying him 3 times. It's not sinking into the water when he was walking on the water. All those, pretty good examples. In the garden, the night before Yeshua was crucified, Yeshua had asked Peter, James, and John to join him there to pray with him because they were the people who were the closest to him. Kepha had a close relationship with Yeshua. He believed in Yeshua. So when the guards and the high priest's servants came to collect Yeshua, Kepha sprang into action to defend Yeshua. Whack! Cuts off the ear of the high priest's servant. Well, what was Yeshua's reaction? That's right, go get him, Peter. He's in here, No. Yeshua was much more gentle. In fact, according to at least one account, he picked up the ear and put it back on the guy's head and said, pardon the pun, cut that out. So, this is what we're doing. by trying to tell everybody they need to get their Hebrew roots. As Henoch pointed out, we use that term. We should probably stop doing that. We're cutting people's ears off. They can't hear us anymore because we're cutting their ears off. Why are we doing that? Because we say we're defending the truth. We've come to an understanding that we believe is the truth. We're going to convince them that that's the truth. And the way we decide to do it, get over here and sit down and listen to me. And you're wrong. And I'm never darkening the door of your church again. And, whatever. And the final example is Shaul. As you know, he was a very learned lawyer. And in his day, he was very zealous against this new sect of Judaism that was not yet being called Christianity. These followers of Yeshua. And his goal was to get out there and rid the whole world of any of these followers of Yeshua he could find. Why was he doing that? Because he believed he understood the truth. He already had a relationship with Yehovah. That's why Yeshua spoke to him so intimately. When he met him on the road to Damascus, he said, "Why are you kicking against the goats?" Essentially, what is the matter with you? Or other choice terms that we might use in the 21st century. It's because Yeshua already knew him. He just wanted Shaul to look at him and go, "Hey, look, it's me. Why are you doing this?" And, of course, he was corrected and he changed to it. We are acting like pre-Damascus Road Shauls. We're going out and beating the bushes and going into people's homes and we're telling them to get it right or we're going to put them in prison, so to speak. Those are all examples, not just of inappropriate behavior, because I could have used anybody to tell you about inappropriate behavior, but these people already had a relationship, a vibrant, usually intimate relationship with Yehovah, and they thought they were defending what Yehovah wanted, and they were acting inappropriately. So just because you think you already know the truth, that doesn't mean you do. I'm going to leave about 30 seconds for questions and answers. If you go in to the letter to the Romans, in the 14th chapter, there's a verse in there. I mean, it's beautiful the way it continues. I would at least encourage you to read the 12th, 13th, and 14th chapters of Romans every day until you got it right. Stop behaving inappropriately. But the 17th verse of the 14th chapter of Romans talks about righteousness, peace, and the joy of the Ruach HaKodesh. If you are walking in righteousness, peace, and the joy of the Ruach HaKodesh, I guess I can't say that, well, if you are doing that, inappropriate behavior won't happen. If you stop walking in righteousness, peace, and the joy of the Ruach HaKodesh, in about 5 seconds, inappropriate behavior will happen. All right, so we don't want to engage in inappropriate behavior, but here's something I want you to remember. We're all going to. So when you see someone else do something that you think might be inappropriate, go to them and say, "Can you help me understand why you just said what you said or did what you did? Because it doesn't seem to be in accordance with righteousness, peace, and the joy of the Ruach HaKodesh." We, every day, actually every moment of every day, have choices to make. And this day, every day, I pray, that you will choose to behave appropriately. And in a little while, our brother John Conrad is going to come up here and tell you exactly how to behave appropriately. Right? Now, let me just ask one quick question of you, and then if you have any questions for me, if we have time. Does anybody understand what we mean by inappropriate behavior now? That's what I thought. None of you. Okay. I have one. Okay, if you would all bow your heads and close your eyes. I was kidding. Look how many of you responded there. Wow. I see that hand. I think I'm done. If you have a question of me. Thank you, Paul.
Sorry if I was kind of demanding to get the mic, but when we were watching the band Rhapsody in Blue, is that what it was called? Mm-hmm. So much stuff went through my mind watching it because I had a different take on it with the piano player. When they were all playing, they were all in unity. It seemed like everything was going real good, and I'm not really too sure about the piano soloist part, but I'm familiar with the song, but just not the piano player. But it seemed like when they got to him, that he seemed like he was taking over. But then when you explained it, and then the guy in the balcony tapping his fingers, I took it that he was like getting upset because the piano player was. And then at the end, when you explained your view of it, I realized that I was acting inappropriately because I was judging, and I should have went to somebody and asked like how to go about it instead of just coming to judgment on my own, because you can't judge something that you're not educated on. And I don't know, it just kind of like, I realized that sometimes we don't even know that we're acting inappropriate or judging or anything like that. And just watching that short thing, I was just so much happened. But I appreciated what you said, that the take is on it. And it opened my eyes to look at it in a different way.
Well, thank you. And it is important. That's very important. Thank you for sharing that, because we are going to see things differently and interpret things differently. So we have to be prepared to listen to each other and talk things through so that we can understand them. And by the way, the soloists, whether it was the clarinet or the trombone or the pianist, in this movement, if you want to call it that, there are going to be voices that stand out stronger and louder than others. Sometimes it's going to be the one who's like taking over and doing things they shouldn't do. Other times it's going to be the whole orchestra steps back and says, this is Yahweh's voice for us right now. Let's listen and let's support that voice. So you just have to be aware. Joseph.
Several things that Rhapsody in Blue is harmony. Mm-hmm. One group was not to outdo the other, which is very much a discipline in what they were responsible to, the piece of the music, what they were responsible for. Also, there's only one conductor. In our case, Yeshua, a Torah, is our conductor. In order to get this complete picture, this harmony, everybody has to work together. Nobody's an individual doing his own thing or trying to override the trombone or the trumpet or the violins, whatever. It all comes to a unity, a harmony. And when that is completed, then you'll have a beautiful concert.
Amen, yes. Another question? Go ahead, Carolyn. Oh,
number three is what I'm really looking at here, Ed. You touched on it a little bit. Got not to hammer people with, oh, you have to follow Torah. You know, what you're doing is wrong. And the reason I'm asking this is I have an evangelistic heart, if you will. I always have, and it was somewhat easier to bring people into Christianity, in my opinion. And this is a lot more difficult because here you're talking to believers who know that they are doing the right thing. They're listening to their pastor and doing whatever he says, not looking at what the word says. But what strikes me here is it says our point is to limit our testimony to people who desire to hear our message. Could you expound on that a little bit? How do you know if somebody is interested? I have not found that to be the case. So how do you pique their interest, or just give a little more insight on that, if you would, please?
One of the ways I know if someone's interested or not is if they start texting on their phone while I'm talking to them. That usually means if they're playing Candy Crush, they're probably not interested. Boy, the whole question of evangelism is really a big topic, and I don't think I have time to really go into it more than what we've already said, which is, B'nai Yosef North America exists to come alongside our older brother Yehuda, and in that way, we have to learn how to be ourselves and not try to make somebody else be us. That applies not just to the Jews, from our perspective, it also applies to each other. I mean, if you're looking at a congregation and they're saying, you have to say Yahweh, and another congregation says, you have to say Yahuwah, and then you're judging them because you say Yehovah, what's the point of that? So we need to figure out how to stop judging each other over things like calendars and how to say the names and so on and so forth. But, wow, I really get your point about how much easier it was in Christianity. I mean, you had tracts, you had, Bill Gothard seminars and whatever, evangelism explosion or something. And, I mean, that's what, they pounded that into our heads a lot. They indoctrinated us to think that way. And so, and they said, the whole world will be saved. And there's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to that sort of perspective. And all we're trying to say is be who you are called to be, and then look at somebody else and don't question what they're called to be. Let them be who God called them to be, because everybody doesn't need to be a violin, so to speak. Was there?
Right back
Do we
here.
have time for this, Paul?
I don't know. Mark, do we have time after Dr. Sakina?
Got about maybe 4 more minutes. I would take Sakina and those two that have their hands raised, and then we're going to do a breakout session where you can get in groups and let's talk about this stuff, because we do need to talk about it. So let's
And please
take three
talk
more.
Please talk about it appropriately.
Why did Mozart kill all his chickens?
I don't know, Sakina, why? Is it because he asked them who their favorite composer was, and they said, Bach, 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 Bach? Were we over here? Okay.
Real quick, one of the most exciting things that's come to my mind I'm trying to do lately is when anyone approaches or you approach them or whatever, the conversation comes around to, what are you? Ask questions, because that really gives you
That's very
the
good.
platform of answer. You'll know where they're coming from.
Yeah, that's very
And keep
good.
asking questions.
Yeah. Build a relationship. That's what that's called. We by the way, when it comes to evangelism, our guiding scripture is about be prepared to answer when you're asked. So it's different than knocking on doors and banging down people.
Just wonder if it'd be appropriate if I could speak to the evangelism thing for a second. Something that I have discovered throughout the years is when some are trying to evangelize, they take an approach of, you're all wrong, everything you've said is wrong, and you're going to hell unless you come like we do. Now, wouldn't you like to have what I have?
Right.
Now, if you insult people, how are you going to win them?
That's a good question.
And this is what's been going on in the movement. Right?
Yeah, we
Some
insult each
places.
other a lot.
That's why we need to change it real quick.
Thank you, Wally.
One other.
I didn't see who the lady was who had asked the question about the evangelism and how to know if someone is interested. I know for me, they ask questions. Why do you do that? Why do you eat that? Why do you wear that? Why do you celebrate what you do? What is this Sukkot thing? So if they're asking questions, then I take
You're
that
gonna
that
get
they're
the mic.
interested and it gives me a doorway to answer. If they're saying, ooh, yuck, that's terrible, that's horrible, they're not interested, and I stop there.
That's it. Numbers 1538.
So can you give Julia the mic? So we're going to take this next 30 minutes, and we're going to have a breakout session. Julia is going to give some instructions.
Okay, on your name badges at the very bottom, most of you, 3/4 or 9/10 of you, have a colored stripe.
Right at the bottom of your...
Oh, yeah.
Look how cool that is.
So,
Mine's
those-
green. Yours
those-
is yellow. Yours
those
is
who-
pink.
Those who have a pink stripe or a purple stripe or an orange stripe, go sit out at the tables out there, but make sure that you have one table for pink, one table for purple, one table for orange. And then those other colors, there should be light green, dark green, yellow, and brown, and blue. You're going to stay in this room and try to sit where you can still have a conversation but be in your groups. For those who don't have a color on the bottom, that means most likely you're from Arizona and we didn't get you in the registration list. So you are free to join any group within this room because most everybody that's in here is from Arizona. Does that make sense? Purple. Purple. Yeah, Jan and Jerry have dark green. Mark and Polly have light green. Ralphie has yellow. David has brown. And Paul has blue.